Thank you, Olga. Good afternoon. When I think about the conversation that started Teaching Matters 16 years ago, that was spearheaded by our founder and chairman emerita, Elizabeth Rohatyn, I don't think that we fully appreciated the true scale of our mission at the time, to ensure that all students could succeed in the digital age and new economy. Our mission was based on the recognition that every aspect of our society and global economy was changing because of the technology, but that our call was not to teach students to use computers. It was critical we taught children to think with the new thinking skills demanded in the new economy. And furthermore, improving educational opportunities and outcomes for our urban students, specifically those from the most disadvantaged communities, that was the moral imperative that had to drive our work. So this is a tall order. The transformation, actually, that I think Liz was really, had a lot of foresight in seeing when she did. We've seen it kind of play out over the last few years, and more painfully, I think, over the last 2. We have watched good paid, white-collar jobs either disappear or upskill. I think that took a lot of us by surprise. It hit home in some cases specifically, but it shouldn't have. Good jobs like stock trading, bookkeeping, accounting, they all share an important quality in the sense that they involve a lot of predictable work. Work that follows a pattern and work that can be automated or outsourced. Now, on the other hand, we have an educational system that is truly struggling to catch up to this new economy. An education that only prepares students to give right answers to predictable questions is obsolete. And I think we all know that. And we know we need to raise the bar. This is not actually that insightful. But we can't minimize the enormity of the task of our urban educators. You cannot teach children to conduct internet research and synthesize ideas when they can't read what's on the page. And while that might sound obvious to you, I can tell you at Teaching Matters, we learned this the hard way. Teaching Matters today is providing new learning environments for struggling students, teacher coaching and support, innovative technologies, and performance assessments that cannot be passed unless students problem solve, research, write, and communicate their own ideas, because we believe that these are the skills of the new economy. And our collaborations with schools, a number of them are here, and so if you're a principal, I hope you will identify yourself at your table. These are schools that are starting to see success with the traditional assessment measures that we've put into place over the last few years, or that I haven't put into place, but Chancellor Klein has put into place. These schools are effectively addressing basics, and they're organized for success. And they're ready now to raise the bar on student learning. These are schools teaching students to read, to learn content, to compute, but their leaders know that they do have to broaden their curriculum. They know that they have to reach beyond a basic education. And that is where we have come in, to help them try to find and strike this really careful balance between preparing students with core academic and 21st century skills. And I would really urge you to come and see our kids in action. Chancellor Klein has come many times. So many of you in the room are involved in this work and in the challenge of building these next generation learning environments. I just want to call out a few of you who are here today. We have principals in the room who are truly pushing the envelope. I'm not going to say names because there's too many of you, but just if you could raise your hand at your table. And we have leaders from the Department of Education that are engaged in real experimentation and risk-taking. And we have nonprofits, foundations, and private sector partners that are engaged in this work of transforming schools. But there's something different now. We've been doing this for 16 years, but things have changed, and we can all feel it. And it is perhaps the most exciting time to be engaged in this work. We have today a chancellor who is taking the school system in a new direction in order to rethink education for the 21st century and to prepare kids for college and beyond. And we are honoring him today for the many accomplishments he's had to date, but for the direction he's taking us now. And while the chancellor is recognized a lot for his many accomplishments, I just want to cite 3 systemic initiatives that had a profound impact on our work over the last 8 years. One was the end of social promotion. 2 was the empowerment of principals. And 3 was what we saw as a radical improvement in the processes for teacher hiring and recruiting. We saw it in our work every day, and we could feel it on the ground, and it made our work better. And Chancellor Klein is tough. He continues to push the boundaries and the conversation on education reform in New York City. And today, he is ushering in a new wave of education and innovation. He's championing entirely new models of schools. I think very few people know about some of the new initiatives that are coming. He is encouraging people and organizations like Teaching Matters to go back and question the fundamentals of school operation and to take risks. I want to mention just a few of the really exciting things that are happening in the system now. Chancellor Klein has spearheaded the creation of the Innovation Zone, better known as the I-Zone, led by Arthur Vanderveen. These are schools that are going to provide students with highly individualized learning paths to meet them where they are and take them to their future. He championed School of One, which was recognized by Time magazine as one of the top 50 innovations in the country, and the only innovation recognized in the education sector. I personally believe that School of One could have only happened in New York. And he's leading a little-known initiative called Connected Learning that is putting home learning environments, low-cost technology, low-cost broadband access to 18,000 families, middle school families. And their teachers will be receiving training on how to rethink the school-home connection for the digital age, and we will be a partner in that initiative, and I'm proud of that. And finally, and this one might seem a little out of place, but I think it's one of the most important things. He is and has been linking the data to look at data not only from kindergarten through 12th grade, but to look at the data from kindergarten through 16, through college. And he is shining a light on the real mission of our schools, which is to prepare students for success in college and beyond. This data, we received the data in our office. We looked at some summary PowerPoints, and I have to tell you, it was profoundly disturbing. However, the bar is being raised once again. And on a personal level, I am grateful to Chancellor Klein, and I just want to show a short little story. I was in my first year as an executive director of Teaching Matters, probably pretty overwhelmed, and I was trying to change the direction of the organization. I wanted to focus on student performance outcomes, a little bit less on the technology. So Chancellor Klein came to our first town hall event, and he suddenly got involved in a debate with students who had been researching, of all issues, social promotion. They had taken a slightly different point of view than the chancellor on the issue, and they actually had some data to prove their point. So he came up to me afterwards at the end, and he said to me, "You guys are not teaching technology, you're teaching kids to think." And I said, I sort of had one of those I could have had a V8 moments. He put it into such clear and simple terms. And I have to admit, I have been plagiarizing this line that you said ever since. So with that, anyway, we wanted to present this award to Chancellor Klein. And we were trying to figure out who the right person to do that would be. And we really thought hard about it, and we really felt it should be a teacher. And so we decided that it should be one of his teachers. And the right teacher, as you know, can influence you forever. So for a chancellor who has framed his work in education as the civil rights battle of our generation, we thought the choice was obvious. Professor Derek Bell, who's connected to Teaching Matters through his amazing wife, Janet Dewar Bell, who has been a supporter of TMI. He is an innovator in the fight for civil rights. Professor Bell is quite arguably the most influential source of critical thought on critical of traditional civil rights discourse. He was the first tenured African-American professor at Harvard Law School, a position that he relinquished to protest the lack of women of color on the faculty. And he has written countless books. He created Harvard's first course on civil rights law, a course that was attended by a young, and I think perhaps impressionable, Joel Klein. With that, we ask if you could present this award.
Thank you very much. You need to know that a law professor whose student becomes successful and well-known is entitled to an academic fantasy, meaning that the student's success is based on knowledge gained from taking even one course. So that at a Harvard alumni reunion during the Barack Obama inauguration week. Then law school dean Elena Kagan surmised that based on the number of Harvard faculty who credited Obama's success to their contact with him, Obama must have taken more courses at the Harvard Law School than any other person in history. Well, Barack Obama did not take a course with me at Harvard, but I am happy to report that Joel Klein did, and so I am ready to engage in the fantasy. Joel, in a position likely as difficult as President Obama's, I am hereby taking credit for your many accomplishments, with which I agree, and imagining that those with which I don't were unwisely influenced by Mayor Bloomberg. With this authority, I am pleased to present Joel Klein with the Champion of Innovation in Education Award.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Tell you, after a night like last night, I needed that. Derek, thank you so very, very much for being here. I had no idea this would happen. Lynette, thank you and for your extremely generous and kind words. Olga, for teaching matters and everything you do for our children, the board, all of your incredible support. I took Race, Racism, and the Law from Derek Bell in 1970. That's important that I can tell you that because I have virtually no memory of things back then. As I say, anybody who claims to have remembered the 70s didn't live through them. So the fact that I remember that speaks volumes. And I learned a lot about the nation. Hey, Bob, I'm so thrilled we're going to hear from you in a while. I learned a lot about the nation we lived in, and why it was so important in the Declaration that we talked about forming a more perfect union. Because our union continues to need to be more perfect. No place more than when it comes to issues of race and education. And so having Derek Bell here today is really very powerful and emotional to me. I learned not only about some parts of the history that some people would like us to forget, but I also learned something very important from Derek Bell as I watched him navigate the Harvard Law School, which was not an easy challenge at that time. If memory serves, he was the first African-American professor there. And I remember him saying that the most important thing was not to be popular. The most important thing was to continue to do what's right. And so from him, I think I learned a lesson that was as important as the texts I read and the issues of equity and equality in America. I learned that if you want to change things, that it's okay if people say he's tough, which is shorthand for saying he's controversial, and he doesn't always please everybody. But you know, if we continue to please all the adults in K-12 education, we'll continue not to succeed with all of your children. And we have got to be prepared to take that on. Seeing Derek here, I'll just go on for 1 second. I really am much more eager to hear Bob Herbert speak and talk about these issues at the depth and with the sensitivity he does in his column. Nobody's writing more and better about the gaps that we are creating in this country because of the fact that we're massively undereducating our kids. In the first 3 quarters of the 20th century, we succeeded in creating the largest middle class in the history of the world. But we put that at peril if we don't transform our education system. But for me, the framing comments come out of something I learned from Derek Bell, and so pleased my wife Nicole is here today, who clerked for Thurgood Marshall. America's just over 220 years old. For the first 3 quarters of our 165 years of our history, we tolerated an education separate but equal. As I learned from Derek, and as I've observed many times, it was sure separate. It was never remotely equal. And that stain, to me, is the greatest stain on America's escutcheon. This, the greatest country in the world, for me. Nevertheless, we separated people, tolerated it by race, and massively undereducated children of color in the United States. My wife's subsequent boss, Thurgood Marshall, then arguing Brown versus Board and the United States Supreme Court ruling that we may have blown it for 165 years, but we get it right going forward, and we give every kid an equal educational opportunity. In simple but eloquent words, that was our going forward commitment. Here we are, a quarter of our history further, another 56 years, and still in America, your skin color, your family's income, the zip code you live in, are all too outcome determinative of the quality of a child's education. That is wrong, and we have got to commit to change it. We cannot wait another 55 years. Our kids cannot wait, and indeed, the world is not waiting for us. That's why what Teaching Matters did under the genius of my friend Elizabeth Rowan, and I salute you for this, was way ahead of everything else. It should be I honoring you in Teaching Matters today, because you were way ahead of this. No, long before people figured out that a key part of the solution in transforming education had to be innovation and technology, Teaching Matters was there doing this. When I started as chancellor 8.5 years ago, the words innovation and education were not used in the same sentence without a not somewhere in the middle. Everything in education was really a broken 19th century model. And it was people like Elizabeth and this organization that had the vision to transform it. And for all the challenges we have, we don't need to wait for Superman. What we need to do is intelligently use technology and innovation to transform the educational mission. It's happened every place else. Think about it. If you were a doctor and fell asleep 50 years ago and woke up today, you'd have no clue. You wouldn't know what the technology is being used. You wouldn't understand the medicines that are out there. But if you were a teacher and fell asleep 50 years ago, pretty much the same thing. You'd still be arguing about one teacher, 50 classes. We have this weird thing. We call it a computer lab. Like the mission is to teach kids how to use a computer. Our kids know how to use a computer. We need to know how to use technology to deliver highly effective instruction. Not everybody can give a great lecture on the Civil War, but there are some people that will give lectures that will transform the way you understand American history based on what they say about the Civil War. Why don't we bring that content to our kids and take them to an entirely different level? That's the power of transformation and innovation. That was the seed that Teaching Matters sowed many, many years ago. And I'd just like to end with one favor. The people in this room who are the heroes are the people who educate our children and work in our schools. I would like every teacher, principal, assistant principal, and educator in this room to stand up so we can all salute you. Thank you. On behalf of our children and on behalf of our nation, I thank you. A week ago, I was in New Orleans on a panel for the Daily Beast, and I was asked if I could wave a wand, what is the one thing I would change? And let me tell you what I would change. I would make teaching the most respected and most valued profession in the entire United States. That is our future. Thank you all for your service and for this honor today.
If you can now just enjoy your lunch for a little bit, we'll have in 10 minutes we'll be hearing from Bob Herbert.